My name is Lena, and I never imagined that the laughter we shared as kids could lead to the kind of silence that haunts me now. It was just another summer afternoon when I noticed the first crack, a quiet shift that felt like a splinter under my skin. We had grown up together, me and Mark, chasing sunbeams down empty lanes in our little town. We swore that nothing could ever come between us. But that night, a hollow ache settled in my chest, the way it feels when you wake from a dream and realize you are alone. I recall how our friendship felt invincible back then, like a fortress built from shared secrets and childish promises. We would sit on my porch, legs dangling over the edge, whispering about everything and nothing. His laughter was the soundtrack of my days, a steady pulse I relied on more than I cared to admit. Sometimes, when I thought no one was watching, I studied the way the light caught his hair and wondered how it felt to trace those curls with my fingers. I pushed the thought away, like you do when a guilty echo creeps up your spine. You don't see it coming until it demands your attention. As the season wore on, cracks appeared in our routine. Mark started spending afternoons at the old cafe by the river, where I used to meet him. At first, I blamed a change in his work schedule, or maybe a sudden interest in coffee rather than laughter. But the truth was darker. I caught him glancing at me with a softness that twisted my heart into knots. I felt a tremor in my hands whenever our shadows crossed. I chalked it up to overthinking, because friends don't fall in love, right? Or so I told myself, with a jaw set tight and lips pressed together. But then came that day when I arrived at our spot by the riverbank and found Mark sitting alone, staring at an old photograph. His eyes were distant, like he was watching someone else's life unravel. I approached slowly, heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. He didn't look up when I sat beside him. Instead, he slid the picture toward me, two of us, smiling at a county fair, our arms wrapped around each other. Pain shot through me, and a dry taste settled in my mouth. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered, though my voice came out strangled. He finally lifted his gaze, and I saw it, the guilt, the fear, the longing. He was sorry, he said, but sorry didn't reach me. It rattled around inside my ribcage like unseen pieces of glass. Our bond felt like it was fraying, each thread pulled taut until it threatened to snap. And in that moment, the weight of what he carried, the confession he hadn't dared to voice, hit me like a tidal wave. The night wrapped us in its cool arms, and I realized that I was no longer the same Lena who laughed on porches or chased sunbeams. Something had shifted, and we could never go back. That longing, that betrayal, it was like a whispered wound, one I couldn't see but could feel pulsing each time my heart dared to beat. I stared at Mark in the dim light, finger tracing the edge of the photograph, and realized our childhood innocence had been replaced by something darker, unknowable. I didn't know what I would do next, but I knew I had to protect what remained of myself. I stood up before the tremor in my legs could betray me further, and I walked away along the river's bank, letting the water's soft murmur carry my unspoken questions downstream. That night marked the end of one chapter and the trembling beginning of another. That morning the sun felt too bright, as if it was mocking me with its cheer. I woke on the edge of my bed, limbs tangled in tangled sheets, heart still thudding with the weight of last night. My room was quiet, but that silence pressed against my eardrums like an accusation. I lay there, eyes closed, trying to will the memory of Mark's confession away, but every breath felt heavy, laden with the echo of his voice and the ache that followed it. My jaw was locked tight when I finally forced myself to sit up. The photograph he showed me lay face down on my dresser, a pale whisper in my mind. I moved without thought, stepping into the hallway where the shadows pooled like spilled ink. Each footstep reverberated with guilt and longing. I should have stayed and talked. I should have asked how long he felt this way. But I ran. I let the river take my questions because I didn't trust my voice not to tremble. I didn't trust my resolve not to crumble into tears. Even now, a knot of regret settled between my ribs. I opened my phone, thumb hovering over his number. His name glared at me like a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. I swiped, but didn't delete. Then I unlocked the door and stepped outside into the early light. The air was crisp, carrying a faint scent of dew and green leaves. The world felt alive, indifferent to the slow unraveling inside me. I walked toward the spot where we used to trade secrets on the porch swing, each step heavy with memory. The swing creaked softly when I pushed it, as if greeting me. I sat down, closed my eyes, and let the motion lull my racing thoughts. I remembered a childhood promise we made there: no matter what happened, we'd always protect each other. It seemed so simple then, like a child's game. But sometimes promises break under the strain of grown-up truths. I tried to trace the timeline in my head. When did everything shift? Was it that summer carnival when he left me alone by the Ferris wheel? Or the night he canceled our plans for a family thing and never explained? My skin prickled with the memory of those small betrayals, the warnings I ignored. In the hush of that morning, I realized I hadn't talked to Jenna. She was my friend since forever, our trio complete with her bright laugh. If anyone noticed the change, it was her. I opened Jenna's number, fingers shaking, and typed a message: "Can we talk?" I hit send before doubt could steal my courage. The reply came almost instantly. "Meet me at the old cafe?" Morning shift. She didn't add emojis or ellipses, just practical words. I felt a thread tighten in my chest, a mixture of relief and dread. I stood and brushed dust off my jeans, then walked toward the cafe. The path wound through the elm-lined street that used to echo with our laughter. Now it felt like a corridor of ghosts. Inside the cafe, the low hum of conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine wrapped around me. Jenna spotted me first and waved, her usual bright grin replaced by something softer, more concerned. She patted the seat across from her. I sat, pulling my knees close. She waited, hands folded around a steaming mug. Finally I spoke, voice barely above a whisper. Mark told me something last night." Jenna's eyes sharpened. "What?" I swallowed, mouth dry. He said he loves me. More than a friend." Jenna's breath caught, and a flicker of something, shock, sympathy, passed over her face. "Lena, that's a lot." My hands trembled. "It's betrayal, Jenna. I thought we were more than this." Jenna reached across, thumb brushing mine. "He'd never lie. Maybe he's scared. Maybe I pulled away gently, guilt tightening my chest. "I don't know if I can trust him now. Everything feels different." Jenna's silence tumbled between us. Then she asked quietly, "Do you still love him?" I closed my eyes, heart twisting. "I don't know." The cafe window fogged with my breath as tears threatened. I stood, voice cracking. "I need air." I left money on the table and stepped outside into a world that had gone blurry. I needed to decide if I'd fight to mend what was broken or let it wash away like those whispered questions down a river. The weight of that choice settled over me as I walked back toward home, each step heavier than the last. Later that night, I lay awake, the ceiling above me spinning with his words. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped a steel band around my ribs. I slipped out of bed in the dark, heart thudding, and wandered through the silent house to Mark's old room. The door was cracked open, light spilling out. I hesitated, then pushed it wider and stepped inside. Papers littered the desk, but what drew me was his phone, unlocked and glowing. My hand hovered over it like a moth around a flame. I tapped the messaging app and froze when I saw a conversation labeled with his initials. Every message from him felt like a confession carved into my skin. Emotional proof 1, screenshot of a message exchange. I can't pretend anymore, I think about you every second. L's name, we're just friends, this isn't right. I know. But my heart won't let go. My breath hitched. My fingers trembled, and I sank to the floor, back against the bed. The proof of his hidden longing felt like a blade twisting inside me. Part of me ached with empathy, his courage to admit the truth. Another part boiled with betrayal. How could he carry this secret while I believed we were inseparable? On the desk lay a folded Polaroid, edges worn and soft. I picked it up with shaking fingers. The image showed us at the county fair years ago, me laughing on the Ferris wheel, him standing close behind me, arm around my waist. He wasn't looking at the camera, he was staring at me, eyes distant, full of longing I'd missed. Emotional proof 2, Polaroid photograph. A faded snapshot, Mark's arm around my waist, his eyes fixed on me as if seeing me for the first time beyond friendship. I pressed the photo to my chest, skin prickling. My heart pounded so loud I worried the house might hear. Tears blurred the edges of the image. My jaw clenched, and I tasted the metallic sting of tears unshed. I folded the Polaroid and slid it into my pocket, phone tucked beside it. I sat up, legs curled beneath me, and let the proofs rest in my lap. My body buzzed with adrenaline and dread. The room felt small, stifling. I closed my eyes and pictured the old swing on my porch where we spent afternoons whispering secrets. The memory cut through me, how safe I felt in his company, how I never suspected this ache beneath his smile. A wave of nausea rolled through me. My hands flew to my mouth, and I swallowed hard. I felt torn, betrayed by the friend I'd loved like a brother, yet stirred by the raw honesty in his messages. My muscles tightened, like a fist clenching. I pressed my palms into my eyes, trying to stop the tears, but they slipped out anyway. After a long moment, I slid off the bed and stood, proofs heavy in my coat pocket. I needed air. In the hallway, the walls felt too close. I slipped outside, each step shaky. The night air hit me, cool and unforgiving. I drew deep breaths, chest rising and falling, as if trying to reset my thudding heart. Down the path toward the riverbank, the moonlight danced on the water's surface, mocking me with its calm. I stopped at the old bench and settled onto the wood, pulling the proofs from my pocket again. I stared at the phone screen, then at the folded photo. They were fragments of a truth I never asked for but could never unsee. My lungs burned with each inhale. I felt the weight of choices pressing down: confront him, cut him off, or find a way to salvage what remained. Part of me wanted to rip the messages from his phone and throw them into the river. Another part whispered that understanding might heal the rift. The river's hush offered no answers, just a reminder that time flows forward, not back. I slipped the phone and photo back into my pocket and stood, legs unsteady but determined. Whatever I decided, I knew I couldn't ignore the fracture between us. I placed one hand on the bench's armrest, fingers curling around the worn wood, grounding myself. My body trembled, part fear, part resolve. The night wrapped around me as I whispered to the dark, tomorrow, I'll face him. And for the first time, the thought of looking into his eyes felt both terrifying and necessary. That morning, before the sky had even hinted at dawn, I woke stiff and restless. The weight of my resolve pressed down on my chest, making each breath feel like I was drawing through a straw. I lay there in the half-light, heart racing as I replayed last night's choice, to confront Mark. It felt like standing on a ledge, knowing the fall could destroy us both. When I finally rose, my limbs trembled. My jaw was clenched, and my palms were damp with sweat. I dressed in silence, each movement measured. I wanted to appear calm, collected, but my body betrayed me with every shiver. Outside, the world was quiet, only distant birds stirred the air. It was too peaceful for what I had to do. I left the house and walked to the small park where Mark often went. The path wound between birch trees, their pale trunks glowing in the dawn. I kept my head down, clutching my phone in one hand and a crumpled piece of paper in the other. On it, I'd scribbled my plan, questions to ask, evidence to reveal, a final confrontation that would leave no room for his excuses. I needed him to feel the fracture he'd created, to understand that trust once broken would not be mended easily. I found him sitting on our old bench by the playground, his shoulders slumped as if he'd aged overnight. The first time I saw him, a knot of fury twisted in my gut. He looked so gentle there, eyes fixed on the empty swings. Part of me still loved him, and that love made the betrayal burn hotter. I swallowed and stepped forward. He looked up, surprise flickering in his gaze before it crumpled into guilt. "Lena," he said softly. "Don't," I cut in, voice tighter than I intended. My throat was raw. Don't call my name like that. His eyes widened. I thought you wanted to talk. Yeah, I wanted to talk, I said, seating myself on the far end of the bench, forcing distance between us. My hands curled into fists in my lap. But I also want answers. He leaned forward. Ask me anything. I took out the evidence, first his phone, then the Polaroid. I held them out like exhibits. He flinched as if I'd struck him. I watched his pulse jump at his temple. Why didn't you ever tell me? I whispered, voice trembling. Why keep it hidden until last night? Mark's throat bobbed as he swallowed. He ran a hand through his hair, knuckles whitening. I was afraid. I cared about our friendship more than anything. I thought I could push it away, pretend it would pass. You weren't honest with me, I said, head shaking. You robbed me of choice. My jaw clenched. I trusted you. His gaze dropped to the ground. I know. I'm so sorry. I waited, body tense. The silence stretched between us like barbed wire. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out a second paper, notes I'd taken from his messages, lines he'd sent me. I read them aloud, watching his face go pale. I think of you every morning. I wish I could hold you the way I see you. I can't keep this inside anymore. His lips trembled. Tears stung his eyes. I meant every word. I closed my eyes, feeling tears burn my lids. The ache of betrayal and remnants of affection battled inside me. My hands shook so badly I tucked them under my thighs. Finally, I spoke. I don't want your apologies. I want you to feel what I felt, doubt, confusion, the slow erosion of trust. He nodded, voice barely audible. What do you want me to do? I stood, paper fluttering in my hand. My legs felt unsteady, but my resolve hardened. You're going to leave town, I said, voice low. Go away for a while. Learn what it's like to lose everything without a chance to explain. I saw the shock in his eyes flicker to fear. Maybe then we can talk. Mark rose too, mouth opening and closing. He looked so small, so broken. I felt a pang of guilt, but I pressed on. When you come back, we start from scratch, or we don't come back at all. My chest hurt as I walked past him, footsteps crunching on gravel. Without looking back, I added, consider this your exile. He exhaled like a weight lifting. I understand. I closed the door behind me and sank against it, eyes closed. I could feel the sharp edges of revenge, the promise he'd never forget this exile. In that moment, the line between love and vengeance blurred, leaving me alone in the hush of dawn, both triumphant and haunted by what I'd done. That afternoon, the sun slanted low, casting long shadows through my window as I sank onto the edge of my bed. The quiet felt heavy, like a thick blanket pressing down on my chest. Mark was gone, his absence a void I couldn't fill with busy work or lunch dates. I traced the edge of the Polaroid I'd tucked under my pillow, the faded image a reminder of what once was. My body ached with restless energy, my hands trembled whenever I tried to hold a pen or cup of tea. Each breath felt like pulling sand through my lungs. I moved through the empty hours in a daze, the walls of my childhood home closing in. I tried cleaning, dusting shelves, rearranging books, but the ritual only magnified the silence. My jaw locked every time I passed the swing on the porch, where we'd carved our initials years ago. Guilt slid through me. Was it cruel to send him away? Part of me whispered that I'd done the right thing, that exile would teach him respect for boundaries. Yet another voice screamed that I'd abandoned my best friend at the first sign of upheaval. That evening, I found myself wandering toward the riverbank without thinking. The path was littered with crumpled leaves, and the water's surface glittered with dying light. I perched on the familiar bench, legs drawn close, and let my fingers brush the wooden slats, rough, real, unchanged. The river gurgled below, carrying memories downstream, our childhood dares, midnight plans, whispered promises. My throat tightened, and tears burned the backs of my eyelids. I closed my eyes, trying to anchor myself in the present, but my body quivered with the need for resolution. At home, sleep eluded me. My dreams were populated by his face, eyes full of sorrow, shoulders sagging under an invisible weight. I'd wake gasping, sheets tangled around my legs, mouth dry. When dawn came, I felt drained and hollow. The plan I'd scribbled on that crumpled note, sending him away, felt both vindicated and horribly inadequate. Revenge had been my shield, but now it felt like a brittle blade I'd used against us both. On the third day of his absence, a knock startled me. My stomach lurched. I opened the door to find Jenna, her expression guarded. She stepped inside, folding her arms as if bracing against a gust of wind. "How are you holding up?" she asked, voice soft. I shrugged, avoiding her eyes. She followed me to the porch swing and sat, her knee brushing mine. "He called me last night," she said. "He's lost. He keeps asking if you'll ever talk to him again." My heart clenched. "He made his choice," I whispered, voice cracking. Jenna's gaze was steady. "He didn't choose exile to punish you, he just needs to figure things out." My fingers tightened around the swing's chain. Did I send him away to teach him respect, or to protect myself from the hurt? My vision blurred. Jenna reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. "You two were inseparable. Maybe exile isn't the answer to betrayal." Her words unsettled me. Guilt and anger warred inside my chest, twisting my stomach into knots. I looked out at the yard, the last vestiges of summer drifting on a breeze. The line between revenge and forgiveness felt thinner than a spider's web. I realized that my punishment, meant to create distance, had also left me stranded, adrift in isolation, haunted by my own decisions. That night, I paced the living room, each step echoing in the emptiness. I pulled out my phone and stared at Mark's number. My thumb hovered over the call button. I closed my eyes and let the memory of his voice, soft, apologetic, real, wash over me. The ache of betrayal still throbbed, but beneath it lay something I hadn't expected, longing. Not just for the comfort of friendship, but for the challenge of trust, tested and true. The next morning, I packed a small bag, water, notebooks, my favorite sweater, and slipped a letter inside, an invitation to return, with conditions written in trembling ink. I walked to the riverbank, the breeze lifting my hair, the water's song urging me forward. I folded the note carefully and tucked it into an envelope addressed to him. As I pressed it into the hollow of a tree trunk we once climbed together, my hands shook from nerves, not cold. I stepped back and watched the letter rest there, hidden but waiting. Turning away, I felt the first stirrings of something new, the fragile possibility that betrayal, once laid bare and examined, could become a bridge rather than a wall. The river carried my doubts downstream, and for the first time since Mark left, I felt a tentative spark of hope. Tomorrow, I'd wait for him at our bench, ready to see whether our bond could withstand the weight of truth and exile alike. She sat on the bench, the same one where we had made 100 promises, legs curled beneath her. A soft breeze teased her hair, and her heart drummed so loudly she feared passers-by might hear it. Morning mist clung to the river's surface, mirroring the hesitation in her chest. The letter she had hidden yesterday in the tree trunk felt heavy in her bag, a fragile pact of possibility and pain. She glanced at the path, each footstep on the gravel sending a jolt of anxiety along her spine. Time drifted in uneven beats. Her fingers twisted the edge of her sweater, knuckles whitening. She swore she could taste the metal tang of nerves on her tongue. What if he never came? What if he walked past, eyes downcast, leaving her alone to face the raw ache she had conjured? Every breath was a prayer, every heartbeat an echo of the doubts she refused to voice. Then came a sound, slow footsteps on damp earth. She lifted her head, breath catching, and saw him emerge from the mist. Mark hesitated on the path, shoulders hunched, hands buried deep in his coat pockets. His eyes sought her out before widening with relief. He slowed until he stood still, watching her. Nothing felt real until he drew closer. She rose, legs trembling, and their eyes locked. Her chest tightened so painfully she had to swallow hard. He held something small in his hand, an envelope, similar to the one she had left. With a shaking gesture, he offered it without a word. She stared, unable to speak. Her mind raced. Should she take it? Should she run? Each impulse warred inside her like competing tides. Guilt versus fear, longing versus anger. Her stomach twisted, and she felt dizzy. Finally, she reached out, fingertips brushing the envelope's edge. The paper was cool and familiar. She pulled it free and unfolded the letter inside. Mark watched her every move, eyes unreadable. She read the first line, "I needed time to understand my own fault." She paused, voice barely audible, "You wrote back." He nodded, voice rough, "I had to. I couldn't let your letter be the only one." She closed her eyes against the river's haze. A single tear slid down her cheek. Her jaw felt locked until she forced it to release. "Why?" she whispered, looking up. "Why did you write after I exiled you?" He took a hesitant step forward. "Because he broke off, fingers brushing a raindrop from the envelope. "I needed you to know I'm sorry. I needed to prove I'm trying to learn what I lost." His voice trembled too, raw and honest. Her chest loosened slightly, but the pain remained. She pictured their old swing, the promise they'd made. "I don't know what trust means anymore," she said, voice catching. "I don't know if I can believe you again." His gaze dropped. He swallowed, shoulders sagging. "I know I broke it. I broke everything. But I'm here. I'm willing to face this, for us, to rebuild." Her throat tightened. She backed away, instinct and fear guiding her steps. Her fingers clenched the letter so hard the paper creased. But then she thought of late nights alone, of Jenna's words, of the ache that was love as much as heartbreak. The wind carried his apology in a whisper, she felt its weight, and it pressed into her bones. She inhaled, voice low and steady. "I'm not ready to forgive. But I'm not ready to forget either." He nodded, eyes glistening. A new tension settled between them, fragile, painful, hopeful. They stood silent, two figures on the riverbank, bound by letters that bridged exile and return. The water flowed beside them, indifferent and constant. It seemed to whisper that even broken bonds might find their way back across the currents. And as the mist lifted, she realized that tomorrow, perhaps, they would begin again. She stayed on the riverbank long after he turned and walked away, the damp grass pressing cold through her shoes as she replayed his words, "I'm willing to face this, for us, to rebuild." Her chest ached, a leaden weight that made each inhale a conscious effort. The soft hum of the water was a lullaby and a mockery. She closed her eyes, trembling, and let a single tear slide down her cheek. Her jaw unclenched, then snapped shut again as guilt and longing warred inside her like trapped animals. When she finally rose, legs unsteady, she brushed damp hair from her face and trudged home beneath a sky the color of bruise. Inside, the silence felt immense, walls that once protected now loomed like silent judges. She dropped her bag by the door and paced the living room, hands rubbing together, fingertips raw from nervous energy. The letter in her pocket felt heavy, its edges soft from being folded and refolded. She pulled it out and read his words again, voice catching on each line, "I broke everything. But I'm here." The paper trembled in her fingers, echoing the tremor in her core. At some point, late and unmarked, sleep claimed her. In dreams, she found herself back on the bench, Mark's face blurred, and each word he spoke turned to ash on her tongue. She woke with her heart hammering, sheets tangled like webs around her legs. Her mouth was dry, a desert she couldn't quench. She swallowed hard and reached for her phone. A single message from Jenna glowed on the screen, "Are you okay?" No exclamation, just concern woven in two words. Lena's thumb hovered over the reply, but the screen went dark before she touched it. Later, when the sun dipped low and the house filled with gold, she found herself standing at Jenna's door. The knock echoed in the hallway, and her knuckles stung from the impact. Jenna opened the door, eyebrows knitting together when she saw Lena's pale face and bruised eyes. She stepped aside wordlessly, beckoning Lena in. The living room was warm, scented with the faint aroma of fresh coffee and baked bread. Jenna poured 2 mugs and slid onto the couch, patting the cushion beside her. Lena sank down, the sofa spring sighing under her weight. She tucked the letter into her pocket and closed her hands around the mug as if it were a lifeline. Jenna waited, hands clasped, gaze gentle but expectant. Lena's lips parted, thoughts tumbling over one another until she found a thread. "He wrote back," she said, voice low, trembling like candle flame. "He admits he was wrong, and he wants to rebuild." She drew a shaky breath, warm liquid burning her tongue. Jenna's eyes softened. She set her mug on the coffee table and reached for Lena's hand. Her touch was light but grounding, like a lifeline cast into churned waters. "That's something," she said carefully. "Does it feel right?" Lena's hands tightened around Jenna's. Her nails skinned her palms, a sharp reminder of desperation. "I don't know. I want to hate him, but my chest, it still hurts when I think of him." Her voice wavered, a catch in her throat made her swallow twice. Jenna's thumb brushed the back of her hand. "You don't have to decide everything now," she whispered. "You can take time. Letters and distance, they mean he's trying. But trust is earned every day." The words settled in Lena's mind like slow rainfall. She nodded, jaw unlocking to release a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. A memory flickered, Mark's eyes the first day they met, bright and curious. She imagined that boy versus the man who'd betrayed her, and the one who stood humbled by remorse. Night crept around the windows, pooling on the floor. Lena rose, muscles tense, and hugged Jenna tight. In that embrace, the tension inside her loosened, a knot untangling thread by thread. She stepped back, wiping her cheek. "Thank you," she said, voice small but firm. I think I can meet him again. But on my terms." Jenna smiled, relief and pride shining in her eyes. "That's all you need," she said. Walking home beneath a sky strewn with stars, Lena felt the letter's weight and the threads of possibility entwined in her chest. Tomorrow, she would write back, lay out the rules of engagement she needed to feel safe. And though her heart still quivered with fear and hope both, she knew one thing: the river between them ran wide, but the bridge of truth and time might just hold. She sat at her desk that evening, lamplight haloing the blank page before her. The room's hush pressed against her ears, only the tick of the clock and the distant hum of traffic kept her company. Her heart fluttered like a trapped bird, reminding her that trust doesn't simply return once broken. She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and lifted her pen with trembling fingers. She began to write slowly, each word weighed with intention. "I will meet you at the bench by the river at dusk. We will speak openly. No omissions, no excuses. If you hide or withhold, I will walk away and not look back." Her pen hovered. She remembered his apology letter, how raw and fearful his handwriting looked. Her mouth tasted of rust, nerves pooling in her stomach. With a firm stroke, she added, "I need to see that you've understood the damage you caused. I need questions, not just confessions. I need to know you'll listen before you speak." Folding the note with care, she slid it into an envelope marked simply, "For Mark." A pang tightened her chest. This moment could heal or completely sever them. She tucked the envelope into the tree trunk where her first invitation had waited. The bark closed around it like a solemn pact. At dusk, the sky bled rose into indigo. She walked the familiar path toward the riverbank, every footstep echoing with doubt. Arriving early, she claimed the bench and wrapped her arms around herself, the cool air pricking through her thin jacket. Shadows lengthened. Each breath was a silent plea: show up, show your heart, or don't show at all. Her pulse thundered until the soft crunch of footsteps reached her ears. She lifted her head and saw him emerge from the trees, coat collar up, hands empty, eyes searching. He paused at the edge of her vision and then settled at the far end of the bench. Neither moved closer. Distance had become a language neither knew how to speak anymore. She turned toward the river and waited, muscles coiled tight. Finally she said, voice low, you got my letter. He nodded, throat working as he swallowed. I did, he whispered. Her chest clenched. She closed her eyes for a second to steady herself, then faced him. Will you share what you promised? Her words were sharp as flint. He exhaled, drawing himself upright. I spent these days thinking about everything, about how I lied by omission, about the nights I avoided telling you, afraid of losing you. His voice cracked. He looked at his hands, twisting them. I hid my feelings because I thought I was protecting our friendship. But I hurt you more. A tremor ran through her limbs. The confession spilled out in rough fragments, months of secret yearning, guilt that gnawed at his insides, lonely nights haunted by the image of her smile. He spoke of how he replayed her laughter, how each unspoken word had become a weight he could no longer bear. She listened, every syllable pressing into her chest like a confession carved in bone. Her body hummed with adrenaline, fingers white around the bench's edge. Tears blurred the twilight. When he finished, silence fell, thick and fragile. At last she whispered, thank you. He turned toward her, hope flickering in his gaze. She drew a shaky breath, letting the breeze carry her doubt away. A lifetime of memories, porch swings, carnival lights, whispered secrets, flooded her mind. The ache of betrayal still throbbed, but beneath it rose something gentler, relief that the truth was finally free. His hand hovered between them, uncertain. After a pause, she reached out, fingertips brushing his. He took her hand, warm and tentative. The river's murmur rose around them, an indifferent song beneath the fragile bridge they stood upon. They sat like that as night deepened, two figures bound by honesty at last, holding space for each other's truths. In that shared silence, they sensed the first plank set in place to rebuild what had splintered. And though the path ahead remained uncertain, they understood that reconciliation would come one truthful heartbeat at a time. That morning, the sun slipped through my curtains in pale, reluctant strokes, and I woke with a hollow ache where hope and dread tangled. I'd slept too little, dreams still echoing with the weight of last night's confession and our trembling hands. My mouth tasted of metal and midnight, and my limbs felt leaden as I pushed myself up. I stood in the quiet room, pulse pounding so loud I could swear the walls heard it. I ran a hand through my hair, jaw locked, trying to steady the fluttering in my chest. I slipped into my clothes without much thought, an old sweater and jeans, things that felt safe, unremarkable. In the mirror, I barely recognized the face staring back, eyes rimmed pink, cheeks drawn, but something in the set of my shoulders felt different, tentative, as if I'd been taught how to stand again. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from Jenna. Brunch? I think you need carbs and coherent conversation. I hesitated, thumb hovering over, yes, then tapped it. Outside, the air was cool, dew lingering on blades of grass like tiny jewels. The world felt vast and indifferent, draining with each pre-dawn breath. I walked toward the cafe where Jenna worked weekends, footsteps uneven, as if I were learning how to move in my own life again. Inside, the place was warm, clinking mugs, the hiss of the espresso machine, and that comforting scent of fresh pastry. Jenna waved me over to our usual table, her smile bright but soft around her eyes. Across from her sat Mark, nursing a cappuccino, shoulders squared with resolve. My chest clenched so hard I thought I might not sit. I forced my legs to obey, sliding into the booth beside him. We faced each other in awkward silence, 3 mugs between us like fragile truce flags. Jenna gave me a gentle nod before slipping away to refill her own drink. We were alone. The cafe's midday bustle felt miles removed from the tight bubble around our table. I studied Mark's face, eyes earnest, jaw tense, hands wrapped around his cup. He looked nervous. I knew the feeling. He cleared his throat. Thank you for coming, he said, voice low. And for writing that letter. My mouth went dry. I lifted my own mug in a small gesture. Thank you for showing up. The words surprised me with how honest they felt. He took a breath. I wanted today to be different. No confessions, no ultimatums, just, it's our first morning as us, figuring this out. He gave a hesitant smile. I nodded, heat prickling in my cheeks. I don't know what that looks like. My voice trembled. I wrapped both hands around the mug to stop my fingers shaking. I thought maybe we could start small, he offered. Walk in the park, talk about anything but feelings. Remember how we used to, plan our futures out loud? A soft laugh escaped me, memories of childhood schemes about flying cars and secret hideouts. The tension eased a fraction. Yeah, I breathed. Let's do that. We stepped outside into bright air, cups in hand. Jenna waved as we passed, her presence a warm anchor. We walked toward the elm-lined path, sunlight dappled through leaves. At first, conversation was stilted, comments on the weather, on Jenna's pastries, on nothing and everything. My heart fluttered with each shared look, each small laugh. Then he paused by a low bench and turned to me. I've been thinking about what you said, questions over confessions. He tucked a nervous strand of hair behind his ear. So, can I ask you something? I met his gaze, curious and cautious. Yeah. How do you feel this morning? His question was simple, but it pressed right against the tender spot inside me. I took a shaky breath. Like I'm learning to breathe again, I admitted, voice soft. My hands curled around the mug, knuckles white. Like I want to trust you, but I'm scared I'll break. His eyes softened. He reached out, thumb brushing the back of my hand. A thrill of warmth shot up my arm. I get that, he whispered. I'm scared too. But I'll hold that fear with you, if you let me. I swallowed and nodded. The river of emotions inside me, longing, fear, guilt, hope, surged and receded like tides. In that moment, I realized that rebuilding wouldn't be a single spectacular moment. It would be these fragile exchanges, honest and imperfect. We stood there, hands just inches apart, the park alive around us. Our journey stretched ahead, uncertain and tangled, but for the first time, I believed we might walk it together, one careful step at a time. Days passed since our morning in the park, and each sunrise felt like a test of fragile peace. I woke with the same hollow ache, but now it trembled with cautious hope. Mark and I fell into a new routine, simple breakfasts at my kitchen table, hesitant conversations over leftover coffee, the quiet ritual of shared space without the weight of hidden truths. Each moment was a tightrope walk, one wrong step and I felt the vertigo of betrayal resurface. One afternoon, he invited me to help him finish painting the old backyard fence. The work was mindless, covering chipped pine boards with fresh white, but that repetition gave room for conversation. My hands ached from holding the brush, my back stiff from bending, but the ache grounded me. Mark moved beside me, dipping his brush into a bucket of paint. He glanced at me, paint splattered and honest, and offered a small smile. I realized then how rare it felt to see him relaxed, free of guilt. My stomach fluttered at the sight, and I quickly turned away to keep my composure. As we worked, I noticed something poking from his back pocket, a corner of folded paper, edges worn like a secret too heavy to carry. When he reached to rest, I saw it was a receipt from a therapy center, 3 sessions marked in precise handwriting. My fingers tingled, and my heart skipped. Part of me wished he'd confide in me about the reasons he sought help, another part scolded me for prying. I tucked the sight away like one of those pebbles children hide, unsure if it was a treasure or a burden. A few nights later, Mark phoned me from the road, his voice unsteady. I've been invited to join a support group for people who hide their feelings. They meet near the old mill. His admission startled me. My chest felt tight, a cold hand pressing my ribs. You should go, I said before I could stop myself. Maybe you'll find perspective. He hesitated, then thanked me. The pause between his words felt like an invitation, one I wasn't sure I wanted to step into. At dusk the next week, I joined him at the weathered steps of the mill, where lanterns glowed pale and a small circle of strangers sat. He waved me inside. I sat with my back to the room, watching him as he spoke about the ache that drove him to confess his love, fear of abandonment born from childhood losses, the weight of unspoken longing grown too heavy. His voice wavered, but he did not falter. My hands gripped my knees as tears blurred my vision. I felt the sharp sting of empathy and the lingering throb of hurt. When he finished, the group clapped softly, strangers offering solace. Mark's shoulders sagged in gratitude, a tremor of relief running through him. I realized I'd misjudged his motive. This confession had been less a betrayal and more a plea for understanding. Walking home along cobblestone lanes, we fell silent. The hush between us now felt different, a space filled with shared knowledge rather than suspicion. At my door, I turned to him. "I'm proud you did that," I said, voice small. He blinked, surprised. "Thank you," he whispered. His eyes glistened beneath street lamps. I pressed a hand against my chest, the knot there loosened slightly. We stood close, not touching, but close enough to feel each other's warmth. That night, as I lay in bed, I traced the memory of his words in my mind, the fear, the courage, the gentle ache that leaked from his confession. My body hummed with a new kind of energy, respect. Action and honesty, I thought, might still weave a path back to trust. Before sleep claimed me, I tucked the mental image of his face into my heart, a reminder that betrayal and healing often share the same wounds. And as the moon traced patterns on my ceiling, I drifted off, hope and regret entwined in equal measure. Early one morning, I awoke before dawn with a heaviness in my chest. My body felt rigid, as if each muscle were coated in glass, and my jaw clenched tight until it ached. The room was cast in pale light, and I noticed, almost without thinking, the edge of a folded photograph peeking from the bookshelf where I'd tucked it days ago. My pulse fluttered like a trapped bird. That image, a snapshot of us at the county fair, filled me with warmth and dread all at once. I pushed myself into a seated position, legs dangling off the bed, and ran a trembling hand through my hair. I remembered the therapy session, felt the echo of strangers' kind eyes. Mark's courage had shifted something between us, but trust was not so easily rebuilt. I swung my feet to the floor and stood, knees weak, then moved like a sleepwalker toward the small drawer where I kept mementos of our life together. Inside was a folded note he'd written after the group meeting, hasty cursive on lined paper. I held it close, and my breath hitched. His apology felt sincere, but my heart still throbbed with old hurt. Later that morning, I found a letter slipped beneath my door. My pulse spiked when I saw his handwriting, though the envelope felt unfamiliar and unsettling in my hand. I tore it open, and inside was a brief apology for missing our brunch the day before, followed by a request to meet at a new cafe across town. My mouth went dry. I pressed my fingers to my lips, taste metallic and cold. Why the change of place? A warning bell rang in my mind, a faint discord in the music we'd painstakingly tuned. I paced the narrow hallway, the letter clutched so tightly my knuckles turned white. Each step echoed with a question: was this a sign of progress, or a subtle test of my loyalty? My body trembled with the contradiction of relief and suspicion. I felt silly, as if I were collecting evidence of his hidden motives like a detective, but the ache of that first betrayal still simmered beneath the surface. By mid-afternoon, I decided to go. I told Jenna I had a meeting. Her only response was a gentle reminder to trust my instincts. I walked to the cafe with my heart pounding so loudly I was certain the city would hear. The place was a small, sunlit room with mismatched chairs and green plants perched on every windowsill. Mark was already there, seated at a corner table, his profile stiff. When he saw me, relief and guilt flickered in his eyes. He stood and tucked the letter into his pocket as I approached. "Thanks for coming," he said, voice low, but I noticed his fingers fidgeting beneath the table, the way one finger traced the edge of the wood. My nerves tightened. I slid into the seat opposite him and folded my arms, as though that barrier could shield me from new wounds. He reached into his coat pocket, hesitated, then placed something on the table, a crumpled receipt and a small key. My throat constricted. The receipt was from a bookstore in the neighboring city, on the same night he'd said he was home. The key looked like one that fits a safety deposit box. I felt bile rise in my mouth. "Explain this," I whispered, voice rough like gravel. Mark's face fell. His Adam's apple bobbed. He swallowed, hands cutting through the air. I wanted to surprise you. That bookstore. I found a rare first edition you once mentioned loving. I planned to give it to you. I stared at him, body humming with adrenaline and doubt. And the key? I pressed. His jaw clenched. It's to our old locker at the community center, he said, voice tight. I stored things there, memories I wasn't ready to share. He dropped his gaze. I thought I was protecting us. My chest wrenched. Shame and relief warred inside me. I felt tears burn behind my eyes and tasted the dust of old regrets. My fingers trembled on the table's edge. I realized that my suspicion had nearly blinded me to his thoughtful gestures. The photograph from this morning slipped into my coat pocket, its edges soft from handling. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The tension in my shoulders loosened. My dry mouth opened for words, but all I managed was, I almost thought you were hiding something else. Mark's gaze lifted, relief and pain mingled. He reached across and covered my hand, warm and steady. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'll never hide from you again. I studied his face, the lines of sincerity etched around his eyes, and felt my heart shift. That morning I woke with a quiet hope fluttering in my chest. The sky was pale and the air smelled of damp earth and promises. I texted Mark to meet me at the meadow where we used to search for wildflowers, our hidden sanctuary. My fingers hovered over the send button, heart thrumming. When he replied, I'll be there, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My limbs felt like light threads as I dressed, pulling on my worn boots and a soft sweater that smelled faintly of him. I walked through the fields, sunlight filtering through tall grass, and felt the hush of the morning settle around me. The world felt tentative and new. I reached the clearing and saw him standing by the wildflower patch, hands plunged into the pockets of his jacket. His eyes lifted when he heard my footsteps, relief and something unreadable flickering in his gaze. He stepped forward and my stomach fluttered. I was worried I might be late, he said, voice softer than I remembered. My body warmed at the sound. You're right on time, I whispered, and for a moment our past seemed like a distant shadow. We strolled through the flowers, brushing petals with our fingertips, sharing small smiles. He picked a bluebell and tucked it behind my ear. I felt a spark of tenderness, my skin prickling in the sun. We talked about everything and nothing, plans for tomorrow, the shape of the clouds, memories of childhood games. Trust felt like a fragile bird perched on my shoulder, and I kept a careful hold on it. My muscles relaxed in the warmth of his presence, and I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, we could mend what almost shattered. Suddenly his phone buzzed. He glanced down, frown knitting his brow. He pulled it out so quickly that my heart sank. Sorry, he said, eyes darting away. It's probably Jenna. My throat tightened. I had told him I needed honesty above all, but my pulse thundered with anxiety. I watched as he swiped and typed a brief response. The screen glowed in his hand, and without thinking I stepped closer. The distance between us felt like a thread pulling taut under tension. I saw a line of text, can't wait to see you tonight. My breath hitched, a cold wave that rushed through my blood. My vision blurred as I forced my eyes back to his face. Who's that? I gasped, voice shaky. His eyebrows furrowed, phone slipping into his pocket. A wrong chat, he murmured, lips pressed tight. My hands trembled and I bit my lip, dry as the petals underfoot. My jaw locked, and for a moment the meadow's calm turned jagged, like broken glass under my feet. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away, the sudden distance stretching between us like a chasm. My chest hurt with betrayal that tasted even sharper than before. A wrong chat? I repeated, voice hollow. He swallowed, shoulders slumping. It's an old friend from out of town. His words stumbled on my guard. I felt my heart stutter, fight, and break again. The wildflowers swayed around us, uncaring witnesses to our unraveling. Tears burned my eyes as I turned and walked away, boots crushing blooms in my path. He called after me, voice cracking. "Lena, please," but the words felt worthless. My mind churned with questions. Was this another lie? How many hidden currents ran beneath the surface of his promises? My legs felt leaden as I fled the meadow, each step propelled by the ache of renewed betrayal. The meadow's peace abandoned me, leaving only the jagged echo of that message. I stumbled onto the path toward home, hands shaking so hard I couldn't steady them. The sun's warmth became a furnace against the frost settling in my bones. The promise we had so carefully stitched together unraveled in a moment, and I felt my world tilt on its axis. As I crossed the threshold of our fortress of trust, I realized that revenge had not ended, it was only beginning anew. That afternoon, the sky darkened with low-hanging clouds as I crossed the threshold into our living room. My boots still bore the scuff of broken petals from the meadow, and my chest felt bruised with betrayal. The door clicked shut behind me, and the hush pressed so heavily I could hear my own heartbeat, uneven and urgent. I tossed my keys onto the table, the metal clattering like an accusation. My hands trembled, and I pressed them against my temples, trying to steady the storm of thoughts crashing in my mind. I remembered the message on his phone, the heart icon I'd refused to say aloud, and the flicker of his guilty gaze. Part of me wanted to storm back to that meadow and tear every hidden secret from his hands. Another part ached to chase after him, to beg for the fragments of trust we'd once shared. I paced the carpet, heels clicking, throat tight. The walls felt too small, too close, and I needed space, to breathe, to think, to decide what shape my pain would take. In the kitchen, I grabbed a knife from the block and turned it over in my hand, its edge cold against my palm. I thought of the rare first edition he'd hunted down, of the key to the locker he claimed held memories. My pulse quickened. If he was hiding letters, photographs, tokens of his affection alongside this new deceit, I would find them. I would unearth every proof of his duplicity and let him see how it felt to have his secrets exposed, laid bare like prey under a blistering sun. I moved to my coat rack, yanked down my heavy jacket, and slipped the key from the safety deposit box into my pocket. The weight of it was comforting, solid and undeniable, unlike his shifting explanations. I filled my bag with essentials, my flashlight, a notebook where I'd begun to log our fragmented truth, and my phone, its screen still smudged with his final text. My hands grew steady with purpose, resolve anchoring the tremor in my limbs. Outside, the wind whipped at my hair, carrying the scent of rain. I walked briskly to the community center where the locker awaited. Each step was measured, deliberate, unspooling the tension coiled in my chest. When I reached the corridor of lockers, the echo of my footsteps felt like war drums. I knelt before the metal door marked with our old combination, the numbers etched in memory, another promise he'd asked me to trust. The key fit smoothly, and with a twist that felt like breaking glass, the door swung open. Inside lay a neat stack of envelopes tied with ribbon, their edges yellowed. Beneath them sat the hardcover book he'd acquired for me. I lifted the top envelope and read his cursive, "For the woman who taught me to dream." My chest tightened as I unfolded the letter inside. His words were tender, apologetic, full of hope, that he could rebuild what he broke. But beneath that lay another slip of paper, a receipt from a dinner reservation dated the same night as the text I'd seen. My breath caught. He'd dined with someone else, someone whose number he'd saved under a nickname I didn't recognize. My vision blurred and tears burned. My jaw locked as anger and sorrow fused into icy resolve. I gathered the envelopes and the book and tucked them into my bag. The locker door closed with a definitive click. I felt as though I'd locked away the last shreds of faith I'd held in him. My betrayal had metamorphosed into outrage, and I would not remain passive. Back on the street, I called Jenna. My voice was low, fierce. "I need your help," I said. "I found more." She responded with immediate understanding, "Meet me at the cafe. I'll be there in 10. I hung up and let the rain begin, each drop a sharp reminder that nothing remained hidden now. My plan formed in my mind, a confrontation where every envelope, every letter, every receipt would be laid across the table like evidence in a trial. He would watch the collapse of his own sanctuary as I narrated each hurt his duplicity had caused. He would feel the fracture in my voice, the tremor in my hands, the cold edge of my disappointment. As I strode toward the cafe, rain soaking through my sleeves, I realized that revenge was no longer a distant promise. It was the path I walked now, step by determined step. That evening, rain had turned the streets slick and reflective as I hurried toward the cafe where Jenna waited. My bag felt heavy with evidence, letters, receipts, the rare book, and my mind raced with every image I'd uncovered in the locker. The sky above bled into twilight, and each step echoed my determination. Tonight, I would force him to face every hidden corner of his deceit. Inside the cafe, Jenna sat in our usual nook, her expression taut but resolute. She slid a mug of steaming tea across the table to me without a word. I unzipped my bag and laid out the contents, the stack of envelopes, the hardcover book, and the crumpled receipt. My fingers trembled, and I swallowed hard. Jenna reached out and covered my hand, anchoring me. I nodded, and she slipped out, promising to return when the time was right. Moments later, the door chimed and he appeared, soaked by rain, coat dripping, eyes wide with apprehension. He froze when he saw the tableau on the table. "Lena?" His voice cracked, halfway between plea and fear. I gestured for him to sit, voice low. "You know what this is." He swallowed, sliding onto the bench opposite me. I felt the energy shift, the room shrinking until it held only the three of us and the weight of truth. I picked up the receipt first. "Explain this." My tone was calm but firm. He leaned forward, fingers tapping the table's edge. "It's a mistake," he began. I ran into an old friend from college. We had coffee." His eyes pleaded, but I held up the book. "And the rare edition?" He closed his eyes, shoulders sagging. "I bought it with her help. She knew the seller." I felt betrayal churn like acid. "So you needed someone else's help for my gift, but you hid it." He winced. I was ashamed I couldn't do it on my own. I slid the first envelope toward him. "These letters, your memories, were meant to rebuild us?" He swallowed. "Yes." My jaw clenched. "Then why did you betray me again by meeting her?" His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. "I didn't. Those were early drafts, I never sent them." I shook my head. "But the dinner receipt shows otherwise." He glanced at Jenna's empty chair, then back to me. "I panicked when you agreed to meet. I thought I'd lose you if I told the truth about everything at once." Anger flared, burning through the remnants of my hurt. "You keep lying to protect me, but each lie carves another scar." I leaned back, voice shaking. "You made me detective of my own heartbreak." Tears stung my eyes as I pressed on. I wanted honesty. "You gave me shadows." He reached out, hand hovering above mine. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I held up a second envelope. "This one contains our childhood photos, the ones you showed me proudly." "But where did you hide my birthday note from 5 years ago?" His shoulders tensed. "I lost it." My pulse thundered. "Or you thought it insignificant?" He flinched. Jenna returned then, tray in hand. She set down 2 mugs of water and slipped herself between us. Her gaze swept from him to me and back again. "Lena," she said softly, "you demanded truth." I nodded, eyes never leaving his. "I did." He looked at her before turning back. "I'll accept the consequences," he said. "Tell me what I must do." My breath caught. The raw hope I'd felt weeks ago flickered. I folded my arms, considering him, the friend who'd loved me, the man who'd betrayed me. My body trembled with conflicting desires, to punish him until he understood the depth of my pain, and to salvage the fragment of trust that still beat inside me. Finally, I exhaled. "You'll return everything you hid. You'll come clean to anyone you lied to. And you'll let me set the pace of our reconnection." His eyes glistened. He nodded, voice unsteady. "Anything." Jenna gave me a small nod of support. I gathered the evidence, sliding the envelopes back into my bag one by one. Rain tapped against the window like nervous applause. As we left the cafe, the night air felt sharper, the city glinting under street lamps. He walked beside me, silent but present, and I realized that the bridge between us was being rebuilt plank by plank, uneven, exposed, but undeniably there. Each step forward would test us, but I was no longer willing to drift in his currents of secrecy. Tonight, I claimed the power to demand truth, and with it, the fragile promise of true forgiveness. ChatGPT. Leaving the cafe, we stepped into a world washed clean by the late-hour rain. The pavement glistened under the street lamps, each droplet holding the promise of a new beginning. Mark walked beside me, coat collar turned up against the lingering chill. My bag felt lighter now, emptied of the letters and receipts that had once been weapons. Instead, I carried only the weight of my decision, to demand honesty, to demand respect, and to demand that he prove, day by day, that our bond was worth rebuilding. We walked in silence at first, the quiet between us no longer charged with accusation but brimming with cautious possibility. I listened to his footsteps beside mine, steady and tentative, as though he too were learning to trust his own resolve. The night air clung to our skin, and the rhythmic drip of water from awning to gutter marked time in soft percussion. Each breath felt deliberate, each step an affirmation that we could move forward together, or apart. When we reached the old riverbank path, where our story had first splintered, I paused. Moonlight danced on the water's surface, broken by the faint ripple of currents below. This spot, I said, voice steady, has seen every stage of our friendship, from joy to betrayal to this fragile moment. My heart pounded so hard I thought he might hear it. He nodded, eyes on the glimmering river. I know, he whispered. And I want to make sure the next chapter is one I don't betray. I uncrossed my arms and offered him my hand. It hovered between us, fingers almost touching. I closed my eyes and felt the cool air rush over my skin. My body trembled with the memory of every hurt he'd caused, and with the hope that honesty could heal. When I opened my eyes, I slipped my hand into his. His grip was gentle, but firm enough to anchor me in the moment. We walked along the path, hands linked, and spoke in quiet tones. I set the pace, choosing reminders of boundaries and forgiveness alike. I asked him to share what he feared most, and he told me, fear of failing me again, fear of never proving his worth. I told him what I needed, consistent truth, transparency in every detail, and patience as I learned to trust the rhythm of his words. He listened, head bowed at first, then lifted, meeting my gaze with a raw honesty I had not seen before. When we returned to the bridge where we had once carved our initials in a fit of youthful certainty, he hesitated. "May I?" he asked. I nodded, and he knelt by the railing, pulling from his pocket a small piece of chalk. He drew a heart, then carefully inscribed the date, a symbol of our recommitment. I watched, breath caught, as he traced our initials inside the heart. Then he looked up at me, chalk dust on his fingers, and smiled with a vulnerability that made my chest ache. Tears blurred my vision as I knelt beside him and added a new mark, a slash through the heart, then a new heart beside it, fresh and whole. It felt like both an ending and a beginning. We rose, shoulders brushing, and stood on the bridge in quiet communion. The river flowed beneath us, carrying away fragments of the past, indifferent yet constant. We walked home under a sky slowly brightening with the promise of dawn. My hand still held his, and I realized that forgiveness would never erase pain, it would absorb it, shape it into something stronger. Morning birds began their hesitant chorus as we crossed the threshold of my front door. He let go of my hand but remained close, a silent pledge of presence. Inside, I looked at him and felt the fragile stirrings of trust. I did not know whether our love would bloom or wither under the weight of memory, but I knew we had chosen truth and vulnerability over silence and avoidance. As he turned to leave, he paused and pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead, an apology and a promise woven into one. I watched him go, heart trembling with the ache of love and the sting of uncertainty. Left alone, I stood in the hush of my living room, moonlight filtering through the window. I traced the chalk heart in my mind and whispered to the night, "Let tomorrow be honest." And in that silent vow, I felt the river of our story flow onward, carrying both our scars and our hope into the unknown.